What's up guys, this is the Addiction HB5B Nissan S15. This is the Naoki Nakamura 2020 street body. It's a really high quality body. Here we have the window masks. It comes with quite a bit of window masking. These Addiction bodies come with like 4 masks per window. It's kind of a lot, but it also gets really good, really precise masking. So you don't get a lot of bleed through on these windows, which is really awesome. These Addiction bodies come in quite a few pieces, which may be pretty daunting for someone who's maybe starting out in building bodies, but the payout definitely can be worth it. These bodies are really high quality. They come with a lot of really good details and a lot of scale details that make the finished product just look really awesome. Here we're having to take a look at the instructions. Obviously they're not in English since it's a Japanese product, but for the most part you can get the idea through all the pictures. It's not too big of a deal. Gonna set these aside and get a closer look at this body and kind of check out what we're working with. It's always a good idea to just give it a general look over so you can kind of get a good idea of what the lines look like, where you're going to be cutting, where you want to start, what you want to mask off, see if there's any damage. Here there's a little bit of the masking that's peeling. It can't be helped just the way it's shipped. It's a piece of plastic bouncing around against other piece of plastic, so that's what it's there for. It's not a big deal. You can just put a piece of tape or something over it to get it covered. We're not too worried about it. Again, here we're just giving everything a good look through, maybe mock it up a little bit, see what we're working with. Some of these bodies come with additional optional pieces. Here we have some different headlight options, additional aero pieces like side skirts, a front lip, that sort of thing. These are going to be the pieces you cut out for the front and rear light buckets. It's a multi-piece deal, and I'll get more into that later on in the build. Once again, just trying to visualize where these pieces are going to go. Trying to figure out if they're going to go on the hood, if they're going to go on the main body piece. And it looks like they're going to go under the hood, so we're going to figure out if we're going to end up using these or not. These are the stickers that go in the rear light buckets. You get a couple different options to really dial in how you want it to look. The first thing we're going to be doing is going over all the body lines with a Sharpie, just to make those lines darker and give us some contrast and make it easier for us to see what we're cutting and be as accurate as possible. I always try to start out with a clean workspace. It just kind of makes my brain feel less cluttered and let me focus a little bit more. There's a lot of fine details on these things. You can kind of mess it up pretty quick if you're not paying attention. So it's always a really good idea to try to eliminate any distractions that may be lingering around. Once you've taken a good look at everything, just pick a spot and get started. Taking a closer look at these headlights, this is where those additional optional pieces start to come into play. On this body, there are 2 headlight options for each headlight. The first is the traditional light bucket, and the next is the battle eye. You can kind of see it at the top of the screen. Double checking with the example model which style I want to do on which headlight. I'm looking at the instructions to see if it wants me to fully cut it out, and it looks like it does. Decided which headlight I'm going to use for what and get it all marked out and ready to go. A decent pair of these curved hobby scissors is really going to help out on these finer details, especially on where there's a curve. I try to focus on getting as close as I can to the cut lines, but also giving myself a little bit of room for the sanding, just so I can clean up the edges without taking off too much material and making a bigger gap than there needs to be. Once you start getting the finer details cut a little closer, they really start to take shape, so you can get a better idea of where you need to cut and how close you need to be for it to get a good fit. After a few rounds of trimming, getting the body lines closer, you get a good test fit in, get it all mocked up, and get ready to move on to the next side. Over on this side, the body lines are already lining up pretty well, so we go ahead and start moving on to removing the next round of bulk. I usually leave just a little bit extra on these areas so that when I'm mounting the body and trimming for clearance, I still have enough extra material to make a good wheel well shape. Now I am speeding through this. This is at 5 times the normal speed of what it's recording at. So in actuality, I'm going pretty slow, and this actually takes a lot of time. I've actually didn't record a lot of it just because there's so much to cut through and there's so many small details to go through. But just make sure you take your time and get a good cut. That way that you can make sure it looks as best you can. Just going to keep mowing down this bulk. It's usually a good idea to remove these large pieces like this before you go on for the finer details, just so you have a little bit more flex and able to get into those nooks and crannies just a little bit easier. It seems obvious, but you really want to make sure you try to get everything as symmetrical as you can on both sides. When you're later on in the cutting, it can get really easy to just kind of start mindlessly cutting just to kind of get through it. So you want to make sure you try to stay focused through the whole thing just to make sure that your effort is worth it. And you come out with a finished product that you're happy to, drive around and stuff like that. So. We're getting to about the halfway point in trimming here. To me, the body is the easier portion to do. After this, once you start doing the headlights and the finer details, obviously there's a lot more closer cutting you need to do, and it kind of takes up a little bit more time. Chopping through this bulk on these 2 different wing options, I'm going to go ahead and go with the duckbill version. It's always a good idea to keep your body parts close together. That way you can cut out exactly where you need to and get a good test fit in, just so you make sure that everything fits as well as it can. Sometimes staying within the lines isn't enough and you have to cut different ways just to make sure that it gets a good fit. Had to make a quick swap for some fresh scissors. If your fingers aren't tired of cutting yet, they definitely will be after this sheet. This one tends to be a little bit thicker, and with all the finer details, it definitely takes a little bit extra time to cut through all of this. You got to be really careful where you're cutting on these sheets. Everything is so close together, and if you don't have it marked properly, you can step over and cut off a side skirt, cut through anything on the bumpers, something like that. And once you cut through, obviously it's really difficult to try to fix that mistake. Now this is going to be a little black lip that goes underneath the side skirt. One thing I forgot to mention that I did is I went ahead and marked all the pieces either black or red depending on what I'm going to paint them, just so I can organize them and keep them all ready to go once I start painting later on. Getting down to the last couple pieces of aero for the front and rear bumpers. After this, in the next video, we're going to go over the masking as well as a paint color reveal. I'm really excited with the way this paint color came out, and I can't wait to show it to you guys. I really appreciate you guys sticking through this video, and hope to catch you in the next one.